share at this point, you know. I know all the names of the people that were involved in this process. And again, you know, that everybody else was put through, including members of my family.
Even if I his plans. Despair, sure. Let him run around on a battlefield like a chicken with his head cut off. It's what he likes.
Picture this. A red carpet lit for celebration, cameras hungry for glamour, and one man quietly shut out. Prince Harry reaches for a moment of reconnection and finds a door closed by family influence. The whispers say Prince William's role at the top of the ceremony shifted the decision. Tonight we ask, did power protect the institution, or did it punish a brother trying to come home?
Yeah, I don't want history to repeat itself. I think there's a lot of other people out there, the majority, that also don't want history to repeat itself.
That's quite a statement. Who do you think that is?
I'm not going to share at this point, you know. I know all the names of the people that were involved in this process.
Once, they were photographed shoulder to shoulder at funerals and official events, Prince Harry and Prince William. Now, their names headline opposite narratives, one of reinvention, one of duty. An award snub becomes a symbol. Was it about optics, security, or a personal line drawn by William? Stick with me, because this is where family history collides with public theater, and the cost is not just PR.
Longer a working royal.
Sorry?
And you reject that it has nothing to do with the fact that you're no longer a working royal.
Whether I have an official role or not is irrelevant.
Prince Harry left royal life saying he'd protect his family and his truth. But the palace and courtiers saw things differently. Invitations shrank. Calls went unanswered. Little slights compiled into a pattern until an awards podium turned into a ledger of grievances. We'll follow how few private moments, a canceled meeting, a bruised ego, built toward a very public rejection. An insider hears a producer say no, and the internet explodes. For Prince Harry, that no feels personal, a measured humiliation after years of scrutiny. For Prince William, it may have felt like protecting ceremony and focus. Tonight we pull back the curtain on who decides who belongs on Britain's biggest stages and why that choice feels, to many, like a final line between brothers. The visuals are brutal in their simplicity. A broken dog bowl, a shove at a private moment, small objects that became icons of a deeper split between Prince Harry and Prince William. Those images traveled from palace gossip into global headlines. We'll trace how those moments were translated, amplified, and weaponized by press cycles hungry for closure and outrage. Here's the human sting. Prince Harry says he wanted a quiet step back into British life. Prince William and the palace saw risk. The result, a public fracture that reads like exile. As the world watches, we must ask whether the line between public duty and private forgiveness can ever be negotiated in full view, or if some conversations must happen away from cameras to even be possible.
I don't know, need to go into detail how much, you know, the royal family costs or how much protection costs or whatever. You know, what I will say is
the most dangerous breaks don't come from sudden explosions. They come from tiny, repeated fractures. For Prince Harry and Prince William, the public remembers the big headlines, memoirs, interviews, scuffles. But the private record is compiled of smaller gestures, an unreturned phone call, a text that never got answered, an invitation that never arrived. Those small omissions accumulate into a single impression. Distance is intentional. For Prince Harry, every withdrawn courtesy read like evidence that protection and belonging had been decoupled from blood. He'd been born into an institution that once guaranteed certain safeguards. Stepping away felt, to many, like stepping into daylight without armor.
Under the bus, because I know, Meghan, the times when William was there for Harry, and I'm talking dark moments, right? Because we know about the drug use.
As survival, for his mental health, for his family's safety, for the ability to speak without being filtered by protocol. Yet from the palace vantage, Prince William and advisors framed it differently. Public duty and the continuity of an ancient institution required predictability and a minimization of spectacle. That difference in interpretation is the root of the rupture. In this block, we follow the microhistory, the small public moments that became shorthand for deeper splits. A strained handshake on a tour. A quiet tiff in private footage. A journalist's offhand remark that later reads like proof. We show how narrative builds. The media stitches moments into patterns. Supporters interpret them as confirmation. Critics see vindication. Each side feels wronged, and each believes the other crossed an unspoken threshold. Crucially, this is not simply a tale of two brothers. It's the story of what happens when family dynamics intersect with centuries of institutional expectation. The emotional ledger here grows heavy. Grief, resentment, duty, and love, all tabulated and broadcast. As the small omissions turn to a public snub at a high-profile event, the weight of those accumulated wounds made the rejection land with the force of a verdict. By the end of this block, the audience should feel the gravity of accumulated slights and understand why a single no could fracture a relationship already stressed by years of small betrayals. Let's dissect the BAFTA moment not for gossip, but for meaning. A public institution like BAFTA is meant to celebrate art, yet ceremony also functions as a stage for national identity. Prince William as BAFTA's president symbolizes a bridge between institution and audience. When questions arose about Prince Harry's presence, the decision-makers faced a dilemma: invite and risk spectacle, or decline and risk accusation. This block reconstructs choices and motive without inventing malice. We talk logistics that matter, security considerations, press behavior, and the all-too-human urge to avoid a spectacle that would eclipse nominees. We track how a choice in a meeting room becomes a headline and how that headline becomes a moral judgment. For Prince Harry, the result read like exclusion. For Prince William, the choice could be framed as protecting ceremony and national focus. Both interpretations are plausible and both land with emotional consequences. We also examine how institutions make those calls. Risk assessments weighed against optics, advisors' memos that never reach public view, and the political calculus of a future monarch mindful of legacy. Those pragmatic calculations are rarely cruel by intent, but their outcomes can feel cruel in impact. We interview, in voice, the idea of the advisor who recommends distance and the friend who backs reaching out. We show how tiny operational choices can become enormous symbols. By the close of this block, the audience understands the BAFTA moment as more than a rejected invitation. It's a symbolic crossroads. The snub functions as punctuation, final for some, negotiable for others, but in any case a moment that reframed the brothers' relationship in the eyes of the world. Trauma writes itself across decisions. Prince Harry's public recounting of fear, born from the loss of his mother and the dangers that followed, colors every event. When he reads a closed door, he does not only hear social exclusion, he hears a potential threat to the safety of those he loves. That is why security debates are never purely technical here. They are suffused with memory and dread. This block centers the human psychology. We explore how fear changes behavior, hypervigilance, a drive for control through media, and the need to tell one's story before others do. For those inside the institution, Prince William and his inner circle, the psychology is different but equally real. Duty breeds a conservative instinct, a fear that any rupture may invite instability. Their priority becomes continuity, sometimes at the cost of empathy. We dramatize late-night scenes, advisors poring over security notes, an estranged brother reading headlines alone, the spouse who watches and wonders whether reconciliation is possible. We speak to the cost to mental health, family rituals lost, and the quiet small mercies that can no longer be given, a hug in private that would undo headlines if it could be seen. By the end of this block, viewers should feel the emotional stakes, This is not tabloid theater. It's a family struggling with grief and duty, each interpreting the other's actions as existential threats. That mutual misreading is the engine of sustained estrangement. So, what are the plausible paths forward? There are three: repair, reinvention, or stable distance. Repair requires the quiet, unglamorous work of trust building away from microphones, mediated conversations, private gestures of apology and acknowledgement, and a sustained commitment from both Prince Harry and Prince William to prioritize family over headlines. It is the hardest path because it asks two public men to choose privacy over performance. Reinvention is already happening. Prince Harry building a life and public voice outside the British establishment, finding projects that define his value on his terms. That path buys autonomy, but risks permanent distance from institutional rooms that once offered protection and platform. Stable distance, the third path, is the commonplace fate of many families: civility without intimacy, politeness without repair. It's quiet, perhaps less tragic to the public eye, but resolutely lonely in private. In the end, this story isn't a simple morality play. It is a modern test of how public institutions and intimate bonds survive together. If reconciliation is possible, it will be because two brothers found the courage to step away from cameras and speak as family first, not as icons or liabilities. That choice demands humility, patience, and the willingness to do the smallest, private things that actually heal: an answered call, a private apology, an hour together with no journalists waiting. Until that happens, the world will keep reading images for meaning. And the saddest outcome, the one we should all hope to avoid, is that the cost of fame becomes the permanent privatization of a family's healing.